James, week one is in the books, and it's an interesting set of scores and circumstances, and we wanted to look at each of the conferences, and we'll do this week to week, obviously. But we want to look at that, some winners, some losers, some other things as well. There's going to become regular segments inside our host chat going forward, because we understand we want to be a little concise and keep things together here. So first thing, you're wearing a jersey right now that we probably should talk about. We're going to start the Liberty League, and it's apropos that we do so. That is a number 3. Is that Andrew Frank's jersey?
Yes, it is. RPI class of 2015. He was the kicker for the Miami Dolphins for the last 2 seasons until around 2 o'clock today. He tweeted out a thank you to the fans and the Miami Dolphins organization. I suppose they just decided to go a different direction, bringing in the former kicker of the Cleveland Browns. It was really surprising because, I watched all the Dolphins preseason games. Andrew I think he was perfect on PATs. He might have missed one field goal. He kicked a 56-yard field goal in a game about a week ago. So it's kind of a surprise, but he's a smart guy, resilient, hard worker. I'm sure he'll get another opportunity, but we're ringing out the number 3 tonight in honor of him. He's a great kid and a great friend and person that we've had on the show in the past, and so we wish him well. And so good luck, Andrew. We're all rooting for you out here.
We're getting old when we're calling somebody of his age a kid. Yeah, that's number 1 right there.
Yeah, I'm noticing I've got some gray stuff that's starting to pop in here, Frank. I don't know. I may have to start doing the Hair for Men Club or something.
Hair club for men, I think you mean, but nonetheless.
No, the one. Okay, never mind. Bad joke.
Yeah, don't worry. Let's not throw the promos out here. I think Facebook has some kind of thing they don't allow that on the video, so we'll just pretend it didn't happen.
Yes.
Having said all that, let's look at the Liberty League first. And now that I'm kind of tooling on you, let me tool on you some more. Hobart loses to Brockport 34-20, 600 yards of offense plus for Brockport.
Yeah.
Unheard of. What happened?
Yeah, I mean, I tried to go back. I kind of racked my brain and thinking back on the last 25 years or so that I've been following Hobart, and I think this is probably the all-time worst yardage allowed performance, at least that I can remember. I mean, I look back on that 2008 game against Mount Union that had, Cecil Shorts and a few other NFL-type players on it. They gave up 500 yards in that game, losing 42-7. When they played St. Thomas in the national quarterfinals or the Elite Eight in 2012, the Tommies got about 460 yards. Even that game 2 seasons ago against Springfield, where the wheels kind of fell off, Hobart allowed just a little over 400 yards. 603 total yards is really hard to believe that actually happened. And even though the game was ultimately a 34-20 final, it could have been a lot worse. So Coach Backus and the Hobart defense have a lot of work to do. As I said in the preseason show, really was supposed to be the Hobart's defensive line, trying to make something happen. Didn't go their way. Pretty much Brockport did what they wanted, and if it wasn't for that scoop and score by Jason Prince, which was an amazing play, one of the all-time, as far as yardage, fumble returns and all that in Hobart history, was great, but it just wasn't enough at the end of the day.
So Hobart, obviously the season is far from over, and they need to kind of regroup pretty quickly here to sort of get themselves righting the ship, because remember, there's only 5 league games this year. And so there is the chance for lots of ties if you lose one, and you don't want to go down to tiebreakers. You got to go 5-0, I think, really, to have any kind of assurance. Well, obviously it's assurance at 5-0, but at 4-1, life is a lot different this year with a one-loss scenario in the Liberty League if you get there in that situation. And so, they're 0-0 right now in the Liberty League. They will be for a little while, obviously, but they have time to right the ship. They just have to figure out how not to give up 600-plus yards of offense defensively, really. And so
it doesn't get any easier with Fisher coming to town. I mean, Fisher lost a close game to Washington and Jefferson, and now with both teams at 0-1, this is really a must-win game. I mean, if these are teams that are thinking about going to the playoffs, you get that second loss on your schedule, and all of a sudden first round playoff games go out the window. this is really a must-win game for both teams.
And remember one other thing, that when a team loses a game in the out-of-conference realm, then basically they are almost done as far as Pool C goes, because if you win your conference, you're something and 0, something and 1 usually. But if you lose the conference, you're never something and 0 unless you're like Case Western Reserve or something along those lines, because of what happens to the pack with not a full round robin. There is a full round robin in the Liberty League. So if you lose an out-of-conference game, you are probably toast in Pool C, the at-large bids, because unless you have a really superior strength of schedule later on and regionally ranked opponents stack up in your direction, it's an uphill battle with only 5 Pool C bids this year. So that's why that game matters. Right now, every other out-of-conference game probably doesn't matter insofar as playoff considerations for Hobart. Now it's just more a question of using these games to get ready for what's next. Another team that lost in the Liberty League was Ithaca, but not nearly as much as people would have thought. I was looking actually for the upset this weekend, but even I was a little doubtful of my own call on this one. And it took until late in the fourth quarter-ish, or middle of the fourth quarter, for Alfred to go back ahead of Ithaca. They win 20-17, and Ithaca had chances down the stretch to possibly go ahead in that game. And hats off to Ithaca, but what to make of Alfred in this situation, as Dan Swanstrom in his first game as head coach does pretty darn well overall.
Yeah. Well, we said last week that we knew Ithaca would be in a lot of tight games because they have such a strong defense, and they brought back a lot of guys on that defense that did well even last year. Alfred trying to replace a guy like Tyler Johnson is going to be tough. They're going to go through some growing pains, but they did what a lot of the other, sort of the bottom of the top 25 wasn't able to do, and that was win. And so Alfred, which was 21 in the last poll, will probably inch up a little bit just based on that fact. There might be some teams that leapfrog them, but they at least got the job done. And you have to give Ithaca credit; they're going to be a tough out. And coming up next for them is a really good Brockport team that really took it to Hobart on Saturday.
You know it very well. I will break that news to you. Union loses to Husson 20-7. St. Lawrence just failed to kick against Utica, and that was what some people call the worst game passing-wise in quite some time for that team. I mean, we're going back before Leffelbein days here. Sean Richardson.
Well, we tough day. I mean, we talked about the Pioneer secondary being, one of the potential best in the region, and they certainly showed it. I mean, they really made the Saints struggle on a lot of aspects. I mean, just one of those. It could have been one of those games, but yeah. Sean Richardson is a good quarterback. He's a good player. I know Coach Peckhaber and company will look at the film and find some. So I think honestly there may be some teams like Brockport, like Utica, that maybe were a little underrated coming into the season, and they're showing that they're contenders in their own right.
Just to break some news to you, literally as we've been doing this, the top 25 poll came out for week 1 or after week 1. Brockport makes it to number 25 as a result of the game against Hobart. Hobart drops out. Stevenson dropped out. St. John Fisher dropped out. Western New England dropped out. Alfred is stable at number 21. And let's see what else we got. Del Val is at number 12 after their big win we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah.
The one winner, RPI, in the Liberty League. 1-4 with this Liberty League as RPI beats William Patterson 45-0. Not a surprise in that game. William Patterson is just not of the quality that we would have expected to be needed for a win against a team like RPI. A lot of people want to say RPI is the big contender right now. I don't know really what you learned from that game, except they did what they were supposed to do, which other teams didn't necessarily do this week.
Right. Yeah, and I think we saw that a little bit too with some of our former friends at the Merchant Marine and WPI and Springfield. Well, Springfield's a little bit of an exception because they were actually an underdog in that game against Western New England, which they pulled out in the second half, and we'll talk about that in a little bit later. But both WPI and Merchant Marine had pretty manageable week 1 games, and they took care of business, and they're off to good starts because of it.
Let's go to the rest of the Empire 8 that we didn't mention during that part of this. And Morrisville State wins against Norwich 34-20. Kind of a expected result there as well. Cortland, really, it was a great game between them and Augustana, which is not a region game.
Yeah, and I had to. That was my one whiff from last week. I thought that it was Fisher that was playing Augustana. It was Cortland, and yeah, they needed a field goal to win it near the end of the game. So a really well done, gutty win for the Red Dragons.
Buffalo State really had to, bite some fingernails and come and win that game from a little bit behind toward the end of it against Bridgewater State, 20-19. Mm-hmm. I don't know what to make of Buffalo State since they've joined the Empire 8. I had these really high thoughts and aspirations for that team, and they just don't seem to be measuring up to what I would have expected so far. Brockport's doing more what I thought Buffalo State would do at this point. And right now, that result, Bridgewater State's a good team, but it's a New England team that any other day it seems like, a team like Buff State should have rolled over them, and they didn't. I mean, they almost lost that game.
Yeah, well, I think that just shows how the New England programs are starting to catch up with some of the New York sort of traditional powerhouses. There's a lot more talent that's being pulled into some of these New England schools, and Bridgewater was a playoff team last year. I mean, the MASCAC overall had a very good opening weekend. I mean, I think that loss by Bridgewater was the only one, and so they're off to a good start. I mean, the NUMAC was sort of, I think they went 4-3. The bottom half of their league lost their games, with the top half won there, so sort of a mixed bag. But yeah, I think we should keep an eye on some of these MASCAC teams. There's actually an interesting game coming up for Cortland when they host Framingham State, who handled the Endicott Gulls pretty easily, about 41-10. Our friend Matt Noon from Noontime Sports was live at that game, tweeting some pictures and other stuff. And so, maybe we'll have him on soon and we can talk a little bit about New England football. But Framingham State and Cortland will be another good game to watch coming up this weekend.
Washington and Jefferson beat St. John Fisher. That was an upset to many people. WestCon comes from behind to beat Hartwick. I had said this would be a 51.
And you were saying game. Like a 50 games. So you nailed that one.
48-47 in favor of WestCon. No video stream for that game. There were a lot of video issues throughout the weekend. It was disappointing. Yeah. We were talking to our friends at Ithaca about their own issues because ICTV was not ready to go yet. They have some great YouTube video from this game with some on-the-field camera shots, but they had no audio to go with it, unfortunately, because of issues they were having. We pulled a couple clips that we were able to sort of salvage in our Crunch Time feature. If you haven't heard it yet, you'll hear it soon. And we know Del Val had a boatload of issues. Husson's fee dropped out in the second half against Union. Cross your fingers that they use this week to their advantage, the short week that it is, and resolve the issues, because this video thing has become almost a necessity now for these schools in D3 football, and that was a little disappointing to see that happening. Utica, let's close out the E8 and the Liberty League to a certain degree here. Utica, with that 20-7 win, was another one of the highlights, and that means the Empire 8 went, was it like
6-2
instead of 6-2?
Yep.
So that was a good week for them versus the 1-4 that we saw in terms of the Liberty League. Okay, we got 6 other conferences. You pick the one you want to go to next. I'll let you do that.
All right. Well, we can do this sort of in tandem also, because there were a lot of matchups between them. But I would say that the round one goes to the MAC because we had.
All right. We had one in overtime against Salisbury. Remember, it's
Salisbury, right? Stevenson lost a tough game to Frostburg, and then we had Wesley getting topped by what looked like a very dominant Del Val team. That defense looks for real.
Yeah, no kidding. Del Val looks much the better. Wesley still kind of a head scratcher. I think they are better than an 0-1 team. Obviously, I think they come back.
Yeah.
But they now face the same problem we were saying about Hobart. Do they get in? Let's say if they don't win their conference now, the answer is probably no, but again, it's possible. Their strength of schedule will probably show very high because Del Val is one of their out-of-conference games, obviously, and they still have games against Frostburg and Salisbury, et cetera, because for Newport, a lot of good schools on their schedule to come, but they got to turn things around quickly because their league schedule starts soon. Moravian loses to Kings, which surprised some people a little bit, 30-27. Not tremendous number of people, but an eye-opener because Kings may have a good season based on that. We talked about Wesley losing 24-19 and Stevenson losing 33-7 to Frostburg. That was a huge game. I'll talk more about that one a little bit later. FDU Florham beats TCNJ on Friday night 38-24. And then Muhlenberg whips up on Wilkes 62-19. The Mules in their region look to be real in the Centennial Conference. And after seeing what happened to Johns Hopkins and what was nearly a loss for them, they had to go double OT, I believe, to beat Washington in the league. Muhlenberg may have the edge here.
I think so. I think the Mules are definitely they have a potent offense. And Hopkins' run of consecutive Centennial Conference titles might be in jeopardy.
Well, not so fast yet. We'll see what happens with that as we get closer to it. Franklin and Marshall 48, Lebanon Valley 7, Susquehanna 7-6 over Lycoming. Wow. Former Liberty League team in Susquehanna. Former teams of the Liberty League went 5-0 yesterday versus the 1-4 that the actual league went. That's something to think about later on. Merchant Marine beats up on Misericordia. More on that in a moment, though, 56-35. Rowan beats Widener 6-0 on 2 field goals. I've nominated the place kicker for Rowan as place kicker of the week for the D3Football.com team of the week because he deserves it unless he really botches
one
I don't know about.
Yeah, that's a good one.
But look, we had a number of NJAC games in there, and with the MAC games, obviously. And what you'll learn here is this: there was not full consistency, obviously, in either one of those conferences, but the big games seem to go to, or you seem to be a split decision actually, because the Frostburg State game, Stevenson was thought of very highly coming into the season, and they didn't even show, it seemed like, on that scoreboard. Whereas Del Val shocks Wesley in many people's views. So both of these conferences seem to have very good teams right now.
And I think both of and there's a lot of it was going to be decided upon by big plays because in the Frostburg game, I believe you had a couple of turnovers that were that helped the Bobcats. In the Stevenson game, in the Wesley Del Val game, the real difference was a 70-yard scoop and score by one of their defensive ends. I think his name was Nick Wright. And that ultimately ended up being the margin of victory was 5. So that touchdown was really what kind of saved the day for the Aggies. Ultimately the defense held down the stretch, and Wesley quarterback Nick Falkenberg was kind of running for his life back there. He was sacked, I think, 3 or 4 times, and he fumbled on 3 or 4 times as well. One of them, which was that touchdown return, which ultimately decided the game. So Wesley kind of fought back, and they had a chance to potentially win it late. But the Aggie defense clamped down and got the win.
One other score that I wanted to say from the NJAC that we didn't cover in the rest of the conferences was Christopher Newport beat Southern Virginia 45-17. So from there, we've covered both those conferences and the New York conferences. That leaves the 4 New England conferences at this point. And I'm going to choose to start in the NEWMAC because I think they deserve it after a couple of the scores that we saw. Not all of them necessarily, but some of them were very impressive. Coast Guard, Alfred State started things off on Thursday, 34-7 in favor of Coast Guard. That's a team that really is looking to bounce back. Maybe was disappointing to some people last year. I don't know what you make of an Alfred State win necessarily, though, and so take pride in the win, but don't necessarily go to the bank with it.
Yeah, I think it was a good opening start for Ethan Goldkamp, the junior quarterback for the Bears. I think their the running back had a couple of touchdowns, so it was a good that was kind of the way I thought it would go in that one, and it's a good start for Coach George and the Bears, and I'm sure will keep being a tough out for the teams they play.
MIT blanks Becker 28-0. WPI blanks Anna Maria on Friday night. Both those games 48-0. Coach Rob has a team that we expected him to have, and against Anna Maria, a team I thought maybe would have shown more pulse than that. Resoundingly beat them. SUNY Maritime against Maine Maritime, 59-13 in favor of the Privateers, and so that's an interesting matchup coming up against Merchant Marine Academy eventually when those two meet in terms of SUNY Maritime and Merchant
in
Marine
week
Academy.
3. Yeah,
I believe that's a holdover game on their schedule if I remember correctly. Morrisville State, we talked about beating Norwich already. McDaniel beating Catholic 30-10. Catholic is one of those teams, they seem to be able to handle Rochester when they would open up with them or have a week 2 game against them, but against a team like McDaniel, they did not look very strong there. Merchant Marine beats up on Misericordia. The teams combined for 91 points. I know you were watching that one. Bryce Moore is the man of the hour at Merchant Marine, and he definitely showed some offense yesterday.
Yep. Yeah, I think it was one of the 5th or 6th highest scoring games in Merchant Marine history. And it was actually a closer game for a while early on, but the Mariners just, started to do what they do. They just keep pounding the ball, and the defense stepped up. And so, it was a nice week 1 win. Now they get a bye week, and they get a little extra time to prepare for what looks like a pretty solid SUNY Maritime game that's coming up in week 3.
The key we keep pointing out about Merchant Marine Academy is that Bryce Moore can throw the ball. He went 6 for 10 for 162 yards and a touchdown passing, and then 2 touchdowns on the ground. And the point here is that if you don't know what's coming in the triple option offense, then that triple option is extremely dangerous when that passing ability exists, because you try to commit 8 or 9 to the box, then what are they going to do? They're going to just cock back and throw in terms of the quarterback in that pocket scenario. And so it's a huge weapon. Misericordia, though, a team struggling still. And so what do you learn from that game? That Merchant Marine still has some pretty good offense right now, but let's see what happens against a better team as things kind of change going forward. And the game of the week for the NEWMAC in terms of the results, especially Springfield 35, Western New England 21. I did not see this one coming. I think you may have, though.
Sort of. I still thought that Anthony Service and the Golden Bears would have enough offense to put this one away, but really it was a tale of 2 halves, because the Bears were up 14-0 at the half, and then all of a sudden, the pride came out and really started to click. And Jake Eglantine's talking about triple option quarterbacks that can throw the ball and run it. Had a big game, and that ultimately was the difference. And I think this game could have potentially shifted in a different direction, but a fumble that was caused by the Pride defense that was recovered for a touchdown ultimately was the final nail in the coffin. The Bears are going to try to come back and tie the game, but the fumble happened, and then it was down 2 scores. It was pretty much it.
And that was against a CCC team in terms of Western New England. So let's kind of pivot over to there. Salve Regina holds on to beat Worcester State 35-28. That was a back and forth game for sure. Framingham State,
that makes me wonder how strong Salve is, because the Worcester State Lancers have been a little their program struggled the last couple of years, we can say. So I was kind of thinking that Salve, being a second place kind of runner up to the conference champ, would have taken care of business. Maybe they're not as strong this year. We'll see.
We will see. I thought the same thing as you. And so we look at other scores here. Framingham State 41 and Nicot 10, as you were bringing up earlier. We had Nichols 19, Westfield State 13. MIT and Becker we talked about. Curry and Fitchburg State, I told you that game would be an interesting one. It ended up being such, 33-30 in favor of Curry, a team that will be facing Union later in the season, obviously. What do you take away from a game like that? I know Matt Noonan probably has some insight, although we don't have him on this week, so I'm going to have you channel your inner Matt Noonan here and tell me about Curry versus Fitchburg State.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was one of those games that he had circled. I think he's high on the Colonels. I think they're a team on the rise, and Fitchburg has been kind of hot and cold. I thought that maybe they would have had a chance to win the MASCAC last year, but it's kind of a skid of losses in the middle of their season derailed them a little bit last year. But Curry coming out winning that game to me shows that the Colonels are definitely going to be a team to keep an eye on.
So that leaves for us the ECFC and the MASCAC at this point. And go ahead, flip the coin. Which one?
Well, we talked a little bit earlier about Husson and Union. I mean, obviously Husson's the favorite in that league by a pretty good stretch. So not to short shrift the other games that happened in the conference, but that was really the main one to look at to kind of see. All right, well, is this Union team going to have a little more offensive firepower with Dante Chiaffi back, or is it going to be more of a ground and pound? It looks like it was.
Although I'm going to correct it, Nick Cassione played quarterback for most of that game, with Will Bellamy, the freshman, getting a couple snaps in the first half as well. So we have kind of that quarterback roulette going on against still at Union, though Cassione seems to be firm in that job after what happened yesterday. Husson 20-7 over Union. We pointed out earlier, neither team looked good. Neither team looked like competitors to the degree that you would assume, with the playoff team coming off and a team like Union playing against a team that is an ECFC team. You don't learn much from this game on either side. I would tell Husson, don't get too excited by it, because your last touchdown was really a garbage time touchdown. You didn't need to score it. You probably should have taken the knee. We'll get to that in a moment. It should have been a 14-7 final, essentially. It ends up being 20-7. Union, what do you get from this game? You led in offensive yards, but it was against a team in the ECFC, which is just above the UMAC in terms of conference power rankings on D3Football.com. And we know what happened against one of the UMAC teams yesterday in St. Scholastica. We'll talk about that later as well. So the point being, not much you can gain from that on either side of the ball. So, take it with a grain of salt to a degree. Congratulations on win, Husson, and Union's got to do better, obviously, at that point. So we also have Shenandoah, somebody you know and love, coaching that team, to a 40-14 win over Gallaudet, who Union plays soon as well.
That was. I don't know if you read about this, Frank, but there was unfortunately a young man on Shenandoah. I think he was going to be a senior, who had an accident and passed away literally about a week before the game. There was some press down there in the Virginia papers where Coach Yoder was quoted, and they had a service and memorial. So I imagine that this was a very heart-heavy game for the Hornets that were playing for their fallen teammate. It's just a real tragic story, and it's one of those things that hopefully that the road trip to DC and the game help them move, not necessarily move past it, but help them deal with the loss of their teammate. And we wish them all well down there in Shenandoah.
Yeah, we send our thoughts to the folks down there as well. Football is such a team sport. And when you lose one of your own, honestly, whether it be a player or just a student from the school, we've seen just the effect it has, in numerous schools, unfortunately, throughout the country. And we send our regards and thoughts out to the Shenandoah family down there. Plymouth State, Castleton. Plymouth State wins 31-7. SUNY Maritime, Maritime we talked about. Mount Ida beats Dartmouth 12-10, and that's it for the ECFC. That leaves, I would assume, every game that we've talked about would have covered the MASCAC games right now. Unless
I think so. I think we've gone around the East here.
Yeah, and so at this point, I want to ask you to. Let's play winners and losers at this point, and we'll start with winners right now, James. And I'm going to give you the floor here to talk about a couple of your winners. I'll do the same, and then we'll talk about the losers, besides us, obviously. So winners and losers. Go ahead, James Baker. Sorry.
Well, aside from the obvious, Empire 8 Liberty League comparison that we made, to start things off, I think this weekend was really one for the underdogs. I mean, we saw 5 or 6 teams in the top 25 drop their games, including the perennial national championship contender University of Wisconsin Whitewater lost in a 17-10 battle to Illinois Wesleyan. When I saw that score, I was like, who did they play? Oshkosh or Mount Union or something? I was really surprised. So, I mean, but you had Hobart, you had St. John Fisher, you had Western New England, So there were definitely, this was a weekend for the underdogs, and the new top 25 certainly shows that.
And I'm going to say my winners this week. I got to say Brockport State, just a huge winner. And we'll have Joe Germanario coming on very soon with his 415 yards, 360 in the air, 55 on the ground, and multiple touchdowns for him. I'm sorry, James, I'm keeping you in the shot for a reason right now. Because they definitely were winners, among winners in this situation. Del Val, big winners. They had to hold off Wesley in the end. To me, that shows where the East really lays right now in terms of where the strength may come from, because I can't see anybody else stepping up except for maybe Frostburg State right now. And that's going to be an interesting thing that comes out of this week as well, to watch where the balance of power is, because we're already kind of leaning in a direction right now, unfortunately, with St. John Fisher losing, that Mount Union may be coming back into this bracket region again, into this quadrant, because who's going to hold the torch at this point, or at that point, if they don't have a 0 at the end of their win-loss record? So keep your eye on that. That's going to be interesting to watch. So those are my winners so far. Del Val and Brockport, we're going team-specific at that point. So who are some of your losers, my friend?
Well, I would say you'd have to look at prior years conference champions. You had the Liberty League champ drop their first game. You had Wesley drop their first game. Even Stevenson, who was the MAC champ from last year, lost their week 1 game. But like we said last week, losing your week 1 game doesn't spell the end of your season. It just puts a lot more pressure on you in week 2 and 3 to take care of business out of conference-wise, because if you don't win your conference down the road, your playoff chances really diminish greatly. And
so my losers here will include, I hate to say it, but the Liberty League at 1-4. Your 3 teams that left go 3-0, and you go 1-4. Rochester obviously not out of the starting gate yet. That was disappointing. I thought St. Lawrence would show up more against Utica. Did not do so. I was surprised by Ithaca, and that's a bright spot in some ways, because they took a real good Alfred team to the finish line and almost got them at the end of the day. But Union against Huston, like I said, what are you learning there? RPI, William Patterson, good win, but again, they should have beaten them. You can't really reward that scenario yet. Wait till they play a team like WPI for the Transit Trophy. I think that's going to be a good game. So, Liberty League overall, I think, is a loser in this equation. And honestly, St. John Fisher, a team that really, I think, needed to start strong and stay strong, and they come out of the starting gate with a stumble in a way that I think really hurts their psyche going down the line. And like we said, again, 2 losses with only 5 pool seed teams being selected does not bode well for an at-large potential if you do not win your conference. So a team like St. John Fisher, I may say Hobart's in worse shape right now because of what happened to them, but I included them inside the Liberty League at this point. So those are my losers. And you have a couple more categories you were looking at.
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as the New England conferences go, I think the biggest winner was the MASCAC. They almost went undefeated, if not for Buffalo State hanging on at the very end to beat Bridgewater State, which we talked about earlier. I think so. They were into like 5-1 or something to that effect. The NUMAC was a little more 50-50. The top part of their conference did well. The bottom half didn't. So I think I would probably give a lean toward the MASCAC as far as the start for the New England conferences. The CCC, obviously, you had Curry win, but Endicott lost pretty badly. Western New England lost in their rivalry game. Salve was okay, not great. So it was kind of a lukewarm start for what used to be the NEFC, now the Commonwealth Coast Conference. So I would put the MASCAC as one of my big winners for the weekend.
I'm going to call my winners actually a group of them, and you'll see it on your screen right now to a certain degree, and that's the top 25. A little tough to see maybe in terms of the print, but Mary Hardin, Baylor, Hardin, Simmons didn't start yet. Also, Linfield did not. Some strong teams that you'd expect to perform very well. So, excuse me, Hardin-Simmons did not. But look, Brockport, Whitworth, Washington Jefferson, and Illinois Wesleyan join. These are not names that necessarily you would see or expect to see right there this early on, and they're there right now. You also wouldn't expect to see Oshkosh at number 3 and Whitewater at number 15, and that's happening right now as well. And so some interesting developments. To be in this poll right now means that you showed something special in week 1, and we'll be tracking you for the rest of the season. That's what we do as voters at the end of the day. We sort of kind of, try to stabilize this thing based on who beat whom. And Illinois Wesleyan right now is in a mid-pack of the top 25 after starting outside the top 25. Probably not even a thought in a lot of people's minds for that poll. So, congratulations to them. And that's something to look forward to watching as the season continues. What else you got for me, my friend, as they say?
Well, maybe from in the losers column, that we had a little Twitter debate last night about this whole St. John's and St. Scholastica 98-0 game. I mean, last year they lost 49-7.
I'm back, by the way. I brought myself in because apparently we had to go toe-to-toe on this one. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah. Well, you're a lawyer. You're used to debating. So, I mean, for me, I understand that there's only so much you can do as a coach. You want to, they put in the whole roster. They stopped passing the ball like halfway through the third quarter. I mean, I just can't believe that a team like St. Scholastica would be even on their schedule in the first place. And be that inept. I mean, almost to give up 100 points. And at what point, though? I mean, part of it feels like it's bad sportsmanship to run up a score like that. But maybe you got to just play the kids who you have and you do your best. But
or 180.
I know in some games, what's that?
Or 180 of them.
Yeah, right. I mean, maybe start trying to kick field goals once you get inside the 30-yard line or something. I don't know what really could have been done. It just rubbed me the wrong way. I'm you put on 98 points on somebody. That just doesn't sound like a classy move to me, but maybe I'm wrong.
It was a record for a D3 versus D3 game in terms of output in that situation. So you've got some points there, but at the same time, let me say that, look, there's one play I question. That was the 10th touchdown, was a 11-yard passing touchdown at the end of the day in the third quarter. That made it 70-0 after the extra point. And by the way, the PAT kicker deserves credit for not missing any at that point. 14 touchdowns.
I mean, that guy had a lot of practice.
No kidding. His percentage won't go down for a miss that much at this point. But that's the one play. Otherwise, there was no throwing. And so what more can you say at that point in terms of, what to be mad at? I'm more upset or hurt to see Husson, when Union's not taking a timeout with 10 seconds left, score a garbage touchdown unnecessarily. Okay, Union basically, I'm sure if they looked at the coaching staff across the field, would have been saying, we're done. We're not calling our timeouts right now. So I get they got a first down and then got to the 1, 2, 3 yard line, whatever it was. But to play the next play, look, that to me is more damning at the end of the day than what St. John's did. And so, look, St. John's, there's integrity in football. It's a game that you have to respect the integrity of. You can't just lay down and say, I'm taking a knee in the third quarter. It just doesn't work. They played every uninjured player on the roster, which is somewhere in the 170-ish range, I believe, ultimately. And,
that's crazy. Wow.
6 quarterbacks, 4 in the fourth quarter alone that I could count. I really don't find anything that's tremendously damning in that situation. You may disagree, but I'll give you the final word on this, but that's where I would find more problems, ultimately.
Yeah, no, I've gotten into trouble with this in the past. I remember a couple of years ago when Wesley and Hobart were playing in the playoffs, and they scored a touchdown with a minute left. So instead of it being 35-13 or whatever it was, it ended up being 41-13. And I was kind of like, really? Did you really have to keep Joe Callahan in there, who, by the way, was signed to the Packers practice squad? So congratulations to him. He's still duking it out there in the NFL. But I felt that was unnecessary. It's tough in football. Like what's good sportsmanship when you definitely have the game won. I could see from your perspective, I would feel the same way if it was 10 seconds left and someone punches in a meaningless touchdown. That doesn't really, I don't like that. I also didn't like this 100 points that St. John's put up, but maybe. Like you said, they emptied the rosters. They played everyone they possibly could. The St. Scholastica just couldn't do anything and just keep going 3 and out. So you can't just cancel the game or have a mercy. Maybe is there a need for a mercy rule? I don't know. I mean, thinking of it as a player, do you want the other team to just quit because they're beating you so bad? Maybe not. I don't know. I think it's kind of more of a personal, maybe moral dilemma than anything.
Well, we're not going to solve it here, and I'm going to get your headset ready because we're going to be talking to Joe Germinario from Brockport State, the sophomore quarterback, coming up here in the Huddle, so stay tuned. We're not sure we're going to break it out from this into a separate video or not because of the length of this one. So just look on the Facebook page. If you don't see it immediately after this, it will be on Facebook in some way, shape, or form on our In the Huddle page that you probably have already found if you're watching this. So in the meantime, don't forget also, Lightning predictions will be later in the week, as will Crunch Time. And so if you're watching this on a Sunday or Monday, let's say, just keep coming back. That's the whole idea this season. We're going to do content as the weekend goes along. With the holiday weekend this weekend, things got a little out of whack for us, but next week we're going to be a little bit more on top of getting maybe a Saturday interview up or something along those lines, and a little more host chat at that point. But bear with us. It's our holiday as well, and our families demand us as well to participate in that fact, as the case may be. So coming up, Joe Germinario, and also I believe we're going to have Coach Mike Ciarzullo coming up from Springfield. So jam-packed show, or a week of show, or whatever you want to call it, here on In the Huddle.